Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers firearms and alcohol, driving while intoxicated, and officer privilege, and comes to us from WCPO 9's channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. Before we dive into the interaction, I want to give a big thanks to the sponsor of this episode, News Voice. With social media dominating the flow of information, it is becoming increasingly more difficult to find news that is both reliable and informative. News Voice is revolutionizing the news media landscape by offering its users a full spectrum news service in one easy-to-use app. News Voice works by aggregating stories from many different sources all over the world and compiling them into easily digestible summaries. Each story shows multiple sources, which are all tagged with their bias and perspective. You can build a customized news feed so that you can stay up to date with the stories that matter to you the most, and even take part by adding stories and sources of your own. News Voice gives you more control over the news than you've ever had before. The News Voice app is available on both iOS and Android, and is completely free. You can support ATA by downloading News Voice using the link in the description, and join the digital media revolution. Thanks again to News Voice for sponsoring this episode. At approximately 2:24 a.m. on February 9th, 2020, Officer Jacob Salomon of the Loveland Police Department in Loveland, Ohio, was on patrol in the downtown area when he noticed a vehicle make a sharp turn and cross over the double yellow line. Inside the vehicle were Captain Amanda Caton and Lieutenant Patrick Caton of the Cincinnati Police Department. Officer Salomon waited until the vehicle was in a safe location and initiated a traffic stop.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hello, you got your license and insurance on you real quick?
Yes.
Alright, the reason I'm stopping initially why I stopped was you made the turn at the 5-way. There's a dotted yellow line there, and you totally,
Oh, okay.
it was in the middle of your car.
I am a Cincinnati police officer too, if that makes a difference.
I don't know. Where are you coming from?
We were downtown, Loveland.
Okay.
I can't find my.
Do you have your gun on you?
I do.
Where's that at?
In my purse.
Alright. Let me do this. Let me put your gun in the car, in the trunk. Is that okay?
Oh,
All right,
yeah.
Mr. Man.
For your ID? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the problem. I smell alcohol on you. Okay, and your speech is slurred. And you had your gun on you. I'm putting that in the trunk, but your speech is slurred and everything. I don't know what you want me to do. I can't just. I see your badge, but I'm telling you, your speech is slurred. You reek of alcohol. You put me in a bad spot.
You want me to drive home, officer?
No, that's not how it's gonna work. You got your gun on you too?
I do.
All right.
We're about 4 blocks from our house.
Yeah, we did.
You don't understand the circumstances right now, okay?
I don't.
You don't. I mean, everything's recorded. I can't just do nothing now.
Oh,
You guys both reek of alcohol. You were passed out sleeping when I
Who
pulled you
was?
over.
I was not.
Okay. That's fine.
Wide awake.
Okay. That's fine, but she's slurred and everything. I can't
No,
just...
she's not. You do,
No.
officer.
That's
you do
why.
what you gotta do.
That's why. Yeah, that's why I drove, because I was fine.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's do this.
All right.
Step on out with me and talk to me.
We
Sir,
crossed a yellow line while we were driving. You do what you gotta do.
I have to. You understand that? I have to. It's not that I want to.
Yeah, you do.
Okay. Hold on to your ID.
How long you been a cop?
Pat, stop it. Stop.
Sir, you've got your gun on you and you're intoxicated too.
I am
Don't.
not.
Don't.
I am not.
Pat.
She just said you were. That's why she drove home.
She didn't.
She said that's why she drove
No,
home.
I said.
No, she drove home because she's not intoxicated. You do what you gotta do.
Well, here's the problem. Two is that you've got your gun on you. Where's that at?
It's on my hip.
Nearly all states have legislated laws that forbid possessing a firearm while intoxicated, and Ohio is no exception. Ohio Revised Code 2923.15 states that no person, while under the influence of alcohol or any drug of abuse, shall carry or use any firearm or dangerous ordinance, and anyone who violates this code is guilty of first-degree misdemeanor. In 2016, Oxford University researchers published a study in the Epidemiologic Reviews journal that examined 40 years of data relating to firearms and alcohol. The study showed that over 33% of firearm violence decedents had consumed some amount of alcohol, and over 25% of those victims had consumed an excessive amount of alcohol. The study also noted that another large group of studies showed that alcohol was significantly associated with firearm use as a means of suicide. The study also showed that the combination of alcohol and guns was statistically significant among self-inflicted firearm injury victims. The researchers also highlighted a small group of studies that investigated the intersection of alcohol and firearms laws and alcohol outlets and firearm violence, which showed that off-premise outlets selling takeout alcohol were significantly associated with firearm assault. Although these statistics may seem staggering, the researchers readily admit that more studies are needed, and stated, quote, "Because the studies were restricted only to individuals with firearm injuries with no control groups, these case series studies offer little guidance in terms of the actual relationship that might exist between alcohol use and firearm injury, either from others or from oneself." While the Oxford researchers may have conducted one of the most comprehensive studies about the relationship between firearms and alcohol, other studies have rendered similar results. A 2015 study from the University of California found that death rates from alcohol-related gun violence were higher than those from car crashes. And another study published in 1997 in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that non-drinkers living in a home with alcohol users were at increased risk of homicide. Almost all of these studies have concluded that enforceable restrictions on firearm access because of alcohol misuse are uncommon and could offer a potential solution for driving down the numbers of alcohol-related firearm accidents and deaths. All that said, there are legitimate reasons for laws banning the possession of a firearm while intoxicated, and police officers are subject to those laws.
It's on your hip? Okay. All right. Miss Amanda, step out with me real quick. Okay? Just talk to me real quick and we'll go from there. Where do you work?
Cincinnati Police Department.
I know. What district are you at?
I'm just transferred to inspections.
What's that?
Inspections.
Okay.
We live just down the street.
I understand that. My hands are tied. Okay. Everything's recorded and that's, you know the circumstances.
Right.
Okay. Regardless, I'm not charging you for the gun.
What?
Regardless, I'm not going to charge you for the gun. Okay? I'm not going to do that to you.
Here, Officer Salomon informs Captain Caton that he does not intend to charge her for being in possession of a firearm while intoxicated. And while officers are allowed to exercise a considerable degree of discretion in the field, it is clear that Officer Salomon is affording Captain Caton a certain degree of leniency because she is a fellow officer. Very little is known about the crimes committed by members of law enforcement. And that is mostly due to the fact that there are no agencies that keep records of this data. Researchers who wish to study police misconduct and criminal activity are constrained to certain methodologies, including surveys, field studies, quasi-experiments, internal agency records, and the investigative reports of various independent commissions delegated to report on this phenomena within particular jurisdictions. In 2016, the Department of Justice funded a study that focused on determining the nature and extent of police crime in the United States, as well as the incidence and prevalence of officer arrests. The study looked at what factors influence how an agency responds to arrests of its officers, to determine whether certain factors influence agency response and employment outcomes. The study found that the fate of officers who are arrested for alcohol-related crimes is tied to the organizational characteristics of an arrested officer's employing state or local law enforcement agency. The study showed that officers who are employed by departments with less than 100 full-time personnel lost their job in less than half of the alcohol-related cases, and officers employed by agencies with more than 100 full-time sworn personnel lost their jobs in less than 1/3 of the alcohol-related cases. The study acknowledged that state and local sworn law enforcement officers do not typically arrest other sworn law enforcement officers, especially for drunk driving. And in the cases that officers were arrested, over 50% were a result of traffic accidents, and around 24% of those accidents resulted in victim injury. Less than 1/3 of officers lost their job as a result of a DUI arrest. This data suggests that officers often receive special treatment from fellow officers when they are arrested, and most officers are allowed to continue serving as a sworn officer regardless of their arrest. What is more troubling is that there are no laws which require officers to inform their department that they have been arrested, and many departments have no policies that require them to do so. It is impossible to know how often officers grant leniency to other officers, and it would be extremely difficult to maintain a database of this information because much of it goes unreported. It is safe to say that members of law enforcement are not vehemently prosecuted to the extent that an average citizen would be in similar circumstances, and they rarely lose their job or face reprimand.
Hey, stay right here and let him come up and I'll tell him what's going on. Who's he work for?
Same.
I know, same department?
Yeah.
Okay. Here, look at me real quick. I'm just going to check your eyes, okay?
There are several methods which officers employ to determine if a driver is intoxicated, but only 3 tests are standardized by the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. The most common test is known as the walk and turn. In this test, officers instruct the subject to keep their hands to their sides and walk several paces in a straight line. The second test is known as the one-leg stand, where an officer will have the subject stand with 1 foot approximately 6 inches from the ground while counting out loud. The third test is known as the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, where an officer instructs a subject to follow a stimulus with their eyes, typically a finger or pen, as the officer waves the stimulus from side to side. This is the test that Officer Salomon is employing, and it is designed to determine at which angle the eyes exhibit a nystagmus. A nystagmus is an involuntary twitching of the eye that typically occurs when the eyes are shifted at a 45-degree angle or further, but an early onset of nystagmus can be associated with a high blood alcohol concentration. According to the NHTSA, studies have revealed the HGN test to be 77% reliable in determining whether a driver has a blood alcohol concentration above 0.10. Citizens have a right to refuse to submit to a field sobriety test. However, Ohio DUI laws operate under the doctrine of implied consent, which means that anyone who operates a vehicle is deemed to have given consent to a chemical test, such as a breath or blood test. If a citizen refuses to take a chemical test, it will result in an automatic suspension of their license for up to 1 year unless the charge is proven false in court. If you would like to know more about the laws and legal requirements surrounding DUI arrests, I highly suggest taking a look at the DUI Guy's YouTube channel, which will be linked in the description below. Captain Caton is well within her rights to refuse taking any roadside sobriety tests, and she initially refuses, but eventually decides to allow Officer Salomon to perform the horizontal gaze nystagmus test.
And you said you won't do any tests, you won't take your shoes off and do any more tests, right?
Yeah, I mean, I got high heels.
I know, you could take those off. You got gym shoes in the car or anything?
No.
You know you've had too much to drink. You know you drink too much to drive.
We live just down the street.
I understand where you live, but you know I...
But I haven't had too much to drink.
So you're not going to do any field tests to help me out to make the right decision?
Follow us home.
I'm sorry, I can't. I mean, it's beyond too far. I can't just follow you home now. You understand that? It's nothing personal.
Okay.
Okay, but I'm going to have to do what I have to do, okay? I'm going to have to arrest you for drinking and driving tonight. We'll do the paperwork. I'm not going to charge you for the gun. I'm not going to do that to you. I have too much respect for you.
Officer Salomon places Captain Caton under arrest for driving under the influence. After a mild protest, the Loveland officers then allowed Lieutenant Caton to walk home. The officers took Captain Caton to the police department, cited her for a DUI, and then gave her a ride home. Following her arrest, Captain Caton's police powers were suspended pending the outcome of the case. Captain Caton's attorney maintains that no traffic violation occurred, and that her slurred speech was due to her British accent, and accused Officer Salomon of trolling for a traffic stop. Captain Caton's case is still ongoing. Overall, Officer Salomon gets a C, because although he was adamant about arresting Captain Caton, he did not charge her with being in possession of a firearm while intoxicated, allowed Lieutenant Caton to walk home despite being armed and intoxicated in public, and decided to issue Captain Caton a citation instead of booking her into jail. It is clear that Officer Salomon granted Captain Caton preferential treatment, and this is particularly troubling considering that he was praised by the department for enforcing DUI laws in the past. According to this Fox 19 article, Officer Salomon carried out 100 DUI arrests in 2013, 117 in 2014, and 135 in 2015, and his personnel files repeatedly state that DUI enforcement is an area that he excels in. It would be interesting to know how many of these 350 people that he arrested for driving under the influence were cited and given a ride home the same night. While I do commend Officer Salomon for arresting Captain Caton, I also believe that he may not have chosen to arrest her if the interaction had not been recorded. It is no secret that officers look out for one another in situations like this, and there have been many documented cases of officers receiving special treatment from both fellow officers and the courts. This type of behavior not only influences other officers to make poor decisions, but it also adds fuel to the negative stereotypes about police and deepens the divide between departments and their communities. Whether or not Captain Caton was actually guilty of driving under the influence remains to be determined by the courts, but Officer Salomon had more than enough probable cause to arrest and book her, and she should have been subjected to the very same procedures as anyone else that Officer Salomon has arrested for the same offense. Captain Caton and Lieutenant Caton both get an F for attempting to use their badge to avoid being arrested, carrying firearms while intoxicated, and for Lieutenant Caton's hostile and unprofessional behavior. Although Officer Salomon conducted this stop in the least intrusive manner possible, and even allowed the lieutenant to walk away from the scene drunk and in possession of a firearm, Lieutenant Caton was still not satisfied. It is clear that the lieutenant expected that he and his wife would be allowed to return home without any repercussions for their actions. Captain Caton and Lieutenant Caton made poor decisions, and members of law enforcement should be held to a higher standard of responsibility given that they are in a position of power. Officers should not expect special treatment from one another. In fact, officers should be particularly harsh on fellow officers, because officers who commit crimes undermine the sworn duty of their oath and affect the public image of members of law enforcement as a whole. It'll be interesting to see if Captain Caton is afforded the same leniency inside the courtroom as she was on the street, and whether she will be subject to reprimand from her department. Let us know if there's an interaction or legal topic you would like us to discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more police interaction content.